We all faced end-of-life issues in our families. Join us next on Defending Life to consider some important advice in this arena. Hello, friends, and welcome to Defending Life. I'm Janet Morana, Executive Director of Priests for Life and co-founder of the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. I'm also the co-host of the EWTN series, The Catholic View for Women. I bring you the personal greetings of our National Director, Father Frank Pavone, and we're pleased today to be joined by our Associate Director, Father Denis Wilde. Father, welcome to the program.
Pleased to join you, Janet.
Well, of course, we always like to begin with a pro-life reflection and prayer, which comes from the beautiful devotional written by Father Pavone called Pro-Life Reflections for Every Day, and it's available at the EWTN Religious Catalog.
Be fruitful and increase in number. Genesis 1:28. God himself is fruitful. Love always overflows into life. By commanding us as a human family to be fruitful, God is commanding us to be like him. He wants us to share the joy he has of giving new life. God's word counts fertility as a great blessing and sign of his favor. Lord, thank you for the gift of fertility. Help those who are trying to conceive. Give them the blessing and joy of new life. Amen.
Amen. Well, today's show is a very important topic. A lot of confusion out there about what they hear is end-of-life issues. And of course, the Right to Die movement is, we hear about it all the time as a right. And I always remember Father Frank saying sometimes in his sermons, well, don't worry about the right to life. We're all going to have a right to die. We'll have it. We're all going to go someday.
Nobody's going to take it away.
No one's going to take that away. We're all going to have that right to die one day or another.
That's for sure.
But recently, we had a chance to speak again at the Academy for Life in Rome. Right. Father and I were there, and there were a lot of experts brought in to give key addresses. And one such gentleman was John Keown. He's a professor of Christian ethics at the Kennedy Institute of Ethics at Georgetown University. And of course, the Academy for Life brought him over as an expert on this end-of-life issues. So let's hear what he had to say.
Well, I'm here at the meeting of the Pontifical Academy for Life to talk about legal issues at the end of life. And my talk will cover three basic points. The first point will express concern at a judicial tendency to assume that the right to refuse treatment is absolute. And I'm expressing concern that if the right to refuse treatment is seen as absolute, this would include even suicidal refusals of treatment. So I think judges should be very careful to say, yes, respect for autonomy is important, and people have a right to refuse treatments that offer no reasonable hope of benefit or that are too burdensome, but not to refuse treatment in order to kill themselves. And a second judicial tendency I'll be concerned about is the notion that certain lives are no longer worth living. So where it's perfectly proper to say we're going to withdraw treatment because the treatment's not worthwhile, it's objectionable to withdraw treatment because you think the patient's life is not worthwhile. And that important distinction is sometimes lost on judges and has been lost in some of their judicial decisions. And as a result of these unfortunate judicial tendencies, I think there's a danger that they'll pave the way for the legalization of physician-assisted suicide and voluntary euthanasia. Because once one thinks that there is an absolute right to refuse treatment, including suicidal refusals of treatment, then the next step would be, well, if I can commit suicide by refusing treatment and the doctor can help me to do that, why shouldn't the doctor be able to write me a lethal prescription? And also, if doctors start making that objectionable judgment that my life isn't worth living, then the next step is, well, why shouldn't they give me a lethal injection for the same reason? So I'll be expressing concerns about the judicial tendency to see the right to refuse treatment as absolute and unqualified, and also about the tendency to confuse that important distinction between worthless treatments and worthless lives. And my final point will be that I think one important way of retarding the movement towards physician-assisted suicide is to improve the quality of end-of-life care. Because although there are centres of excellence in relation to end-of-life care, unfortunately too many people are dying in distress and fear dying in distress. Now, palliative care and good quality end-of-life care is really, I think, should be a universal right. And I think the law has an important role in ensuring that people can access good quality palliative care wherever they are. It shouldn't just be limited to certain centres. It should be universally available.
He's really good, clear and concise, isn't he, Father?
It's important to hear these things, really, yes.
So he makes some very good points, right?
He sure does. First of all, he says there's, that judicial tendency there to refusing treatment is becoming absolute. This is very dangerous in our culture today. Mm-hmm. Secondly, he says that certain lives are not worth living. I mean, not him saying this, but I mean, there's an atmosphere out there. Treatment is those who can be productive or not. Is one area. Those who are dying and take care of their problems.
Well, they're putting a value on life, on someone's life.
Putting a value on them, right, exactly. It paves the way to involuntary euthanasia. Well, the third thing is that improves the quality of the end of life. This is something we need to look more at. The palliative care should be a universal right, wherever and universal. There's certain points that he brings out as well, and that we need the audience, all of us, to remember. There is such a thing as a worthless treatment.
Right.
And not always can we cure. But there is no such thing as a worthless life. A doctor can judge that treatment is worthless because it cannot overcome a deadly infection. But the doctor should not judge that a treatment is worthless because, although it won't overcome the deadly infection, the person who will survive does not have a meaningful life because he is blind and lame. This is a judgment on the life, not on the treatment.
That's right. And of course, that just reminds me of what St. John Paul II said. Life is always a good. And at that, Father, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, brothers and sisters, we're going to hear more from John Keown. And we have a lot more to say about this threat to the end-of-life issue. So stay with us.
Not until people saw images of children in coal mines did they enact child labor laws. Not until people saw images of human torture did they rise up against slavery. And now, after seeing these images, what will you do? Priests for life, because America will never reject abortion unless America sees abortion. Call now to learn how you can help.
You are looking at the face of an unborn child, 25 and a half weeks into pregnancy. This child can be legally killed by abortion in America. As this ad from the Yellow Pages proves, some abortion clinics sell abortions up to 28 weeks. Abortion kills living children whose hearts are beating and whose bodily organs are all in place. Abortion. Haven't we gone too far?
Welcome back to our Defending Life program, where we're discussing very important end-of-life issues. Well, Father, hearing from John Keown there, and like I said, this year at the Academy for Life, the presentations were focused on the disabled, the infirmed, and their right to dignity and to treatment and the right to life. And so therefore, the Academy for Life brought John Keown over as a keynote speaker. And we took another little segment from his talk and his interview. So let's see what else he had to say about these important questions.
In modern university and college life, I think one of the most dominant developments, one of the most dominant trends is a kind of a consequentialist approach to bioethics. So consequentialism, the notion that the end justifies the means, is a very important strand of modern bioethics. It's very dominant in many colleges and on many university campuses. And I think it's important to show students that there is an alternative to this end justifies the means mentality, an alternative which is part of the rich Judeo-Christian tradition and rich Western philosophical tradition, which emphasizes that certain acts should never be done because they're intrinsically wrong, and that morality just isn't about weighing up and calculating consequences. So that's what I try and do in my course, is to offer students this rich traditional alternative and show how it really does offer, I think, a truer and richer and more meaningful way of understanding ethics than the kind of crude consequentialism that is offered to them in much of the literature. Encourage young people who are thinking through ethical issues about life and death to focus on the innate dignity of every human being. I think that's got to be the starting point for a sound ethic. And once one understands that each of us has an inherent value in virtue of our common humanity, then it doesn't follow that we must consent to all kinds of treatments, because sometimes treatments can be too burdensome, treatments can be futile, and we're perfectly entitled to reject those kinds of treatments. So I'd like to encourage them to make that clear distinction between saying certain treatments may not be worthwhile, but the patient, him or herself, is always worthwhile and has an innate dignity as a fellow member of the human family.
Well, of course, I think that sums it up, like they said, that the end does not, that justify the means. I mean, that's really a very important statement.
That's something that, society has had for thousands of years, even before Christianity.
Right.
This is not a Catholic issue. I mean, it's borrowed from that, but it's written within us to understand life, but also understand what is right. And we don't judge what is right by what we can predict in the future, which from a human standpoint sometimes doesn't work. We can't figure out, each of us has a dignity. And so therefore, we need to show this to people, that in and of itself, the dignity of human beings is important. Right. And so morality is not just based on results, in other words. And what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul in the process? I mean, this does bring us to a faith dimension, but it makes common sense as well. If we do good but violate human dignity in the process, we undermine the very good that we do.
That's right. And very often, when we say about end-of-life issues and human dignity, when a person has an illness and is suffering, what they need is not people figuring out how to help them die quickly, how to exit them out. They are really losing hope. And very often they're feeling a little depressed. They just need hope to be lifted out of those circumstances, to be cared for and spoken Absolutely. To. I remember not long ago, about last year, there was a big thing in the media about Brittany Maynard, the young lady who actually moved from California to Oregon so she could have the right to die. She had a terrible brain cancer disease. And I remember I wrote a blog about this, and I was attacked by what would you call a good Catholic audience, basically, people saying, because my blog basically said that it was terrible that she was being raised up like a heroine for doing this right to die thing, because the reason really what happened was she was losing hope. And on one of my things, I interviewed a young man who he and his family, he had the exact same brain cancer that she had, and he was fighting it full throttle with his doctors, and he actually, I can report right now as of the taping, he's in remission. Okay, so
we can't predict the future.
We can't predict the future, and that's the important thing. In Brittany Maynard's case, she gave in to what the doctors said: you're terminal, there's no hope, this, and that. And she actually moved. Imagine this, moving to another state so she can have this right to die. And she's become now, unfortunately, her case, a poster child for this whole right to die movement.
And now you have people who are not even dying or not even close to it. They're hoping, because maybe their family background, they may inherit the same kind of disease.
Right.
And they're projecting into the future, and it may not even happen at all.
That's right. So this is a very important topic. And when we come back, Father, after this break, we're going to take a question from you, our audience, our viewers, and we're also going to talk to you about living wills versus will to live, a very important topic, so stay tuned. Father Frank Pavone has released a new powerful book called Abolishing Abortion. It is a pro-life manifesto calling on both church and state to fulfill their responsibilities to the unborn. This book advocates principle without shortchanging us on the practical. Father Pavone's new book points out that in the effort to end abortion, we are defending the same principles for which our founding fathers pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, and that therefore we can do no less. This book, this manifesto, is not for the faint of heart. It is a call to give our lives, and it is a strong call to the church to step up to the plate when it comes to elections and stop fostering baseless fears about losing our tax-exempt status. Don't miss this new pro-life manifesto, Abolishing Abortion. You can call our toll-free number at 888-735-3448 or go to abolishingabortion.com. Thank you. Welcome back to our Defending Life program, and we're going to take a question now from you, our viewers. Well, Father Denis, today's question comes from Morana from Spokane, Washington, and she writes, how does the Jubilee Year of Mercy that Pope Francis declared for the Catholic Church relate to the pro-life movement?
The Jubilee Year of Mercy is a great blessing for the Church and for the pro-life movement. God's first act of mercy to us is to create us in the first place. The gift of life, His mercy, precisely because we did nothing to either request or earn it. Moreover, the first act of mercy we can perform to another person is to rescue them. Those in danger, or indeed, such as the children in the womb, cry out for mercy by their vulnerability to being killed by abortion. Then, of course, we see the role of mercy in reaching out to those who have been guilty of abortion, whether by having the procedure or cooperating in someone else's situation, and performing the abortion as an abortionist or a clinic worker. At Priests for Life, we operate the world's largest ministry for healing after abortion, Rachel's Vineyard, and we also invite others to that healing through our Silent No More awareness campaign. We also extend God's mercy to the abortionists themselves through our work with the Society of Centurions. Indeed, there is a close link between the devotion of divine mercy and abortion. This is established by St. Faustina herself and recorded in her diary. It was St. Faustina Kowalska to whom the Lord revealed the chaplet of divine mercy. Father Seraphim Michalenko, who was a principal translator of St. Faustina's diary and the postulator of her cause of canonization, writes the following. On at least 3 occasions, from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock in the evening, she felt like her insides were being torn apart. She suffered so much that she thought she was going to die. The doctors couldn't figure out what was ailing her, and no medication was able to alleviate her sufferings. Later, she was given to understand that she was undergoing those pains for mothers who were aborting their children. That's in her diary, 1276. On another occasion, she had a vision of an angel coming with thunderbolts to destroy one of the most beautiful cities of her country, and she felt powerless to do anything about it. What antidote did the Lord give her? The chaplet of divine mercy. She explained that the city was to be chastised for its sins, primarily the sin of abortion. So let us celebrate the Jubilee Year of Mercy with a profound awareness of its meaning for the pro-life cause. Thank you for your question. You may send other questions to us at any time at prolifequestions.com, and we'll be glad to answer them.
Well, and of course, Father, from the women of the Silent No More Awareness campaign, one of the common things I hear is how they found more healing. Besides if they went through Rachel's Vineyard or whatever the program was they went through, the devotion to divine mercy, they feel, gives them that added layer of healing. So it's very, very important.
It's very powerful.
Well, to go back to what we started with at the beginning of this program, this whole thing about the will to live or living wills, we hear these terms, tossed around quite a bit. And again, going back to the Academy for Life, our friend John Keown was able to really tell us what this is all about. So let's listen to what he had to say, and then we have a lot more to discuss.
Well, I think in relation to the whole question of advanced directives or advanced decisions or living wills, there are good ones and bad ones. And people should be aware that there is an important distinction. I think the bad ones invite people to make judgments that in a future condition their life wouldn't be worth living. And they're inviting patients, consciously or not, to make decisions which are effectively suicidal. Those are bad advanced directives. A good advanced directive would allow you to appoint a proxy who has a good sense of what is the ethical thing to do in the situation that eventually materializes. Because this is one problem with advanced decisions. Of course, you often don't know what the situation's going to be, maybe years down the road. So in terms of making advanced decisions, I think one of the best ways is to appoint someone who you trust, who's familiar with a good, sound framework of ethics, and then they can make the decision on your behalf in the situation as it eventually materializes.
Well, the bottom line is, Father, it's very important for people, very often they want people to sign when they go into a hospital a living will. And that's dangerous because that's predicting, I don't want tubes. You hear people use that phrase, I don't want to have tubes, or I don't want to be intubated. They don't even know half the terms, and they're agreeing to things. Oh yeah, I wouldn't want to be kept alive on machines. And those living wills should not be signed. They're very, very dangerous because they ask you to, like you said before, to predict the future, which we cannot do, right? I mean, that's really the case. So, but there are some key points, right, that I think you want to point out, right, Father?
Yes, definitely. It's okay, and not only okay, it's very appropriate to appoint someone to speak for you, and make medical decisions when you can't do that yourself. Do not try to make specific medical decisions ahead of time. As you just mentioned, you don't know the future. You cannot predict it. If you're appointing someone as a proxy, make sure that first you discuss your moral and religious views with your proxy, and that they understand your position, that they're amenable to it, and they can help you in that directly. And second, your proxy will consult your doctors and your priest. It's important to have a spiritual dimension in this as well. That's
right. And of course, the document we're referring to here is called the Will to Live. And we have these documents prepared by, there's a legal document, and they're different for each state, right? Because the laws changed from state to state slightly. And at Priest for Life, we'll get this for you absolutely free of charge if you want it printed out, or we'll give you the link how you can download and print it yourself. And it's really very important because I can give an example even in my own family. One of my daughters was in a critical car accident, unconscious. She actually nearly died. She was a minor at the time. She was 17. And when they took her to the hospital, I guess they thought she was actually over 21. But the point is, she was put on an induced coma and on life support machines. Why? Because they had to diagnose what was wrong with her, because she had stopped breathing several times. Well, what if she had had some sort of document signed that said, do not intubate, do not resuscitate? Well, they had to do all of the above for her. Actually, she stopped breathing 3 times. So this is why these documents are so dangerous, because you don't know what you're going to need. And many times you're in that state for a period of time, but then with the proper medication and care, the machines are taken off and taken away, and you recuperate. So very dangerous. Do not sign the living will is the bottom line. Get the will to live, which will provide for them.
There's more flexibility for the individual in the will to live.
Well, Father, thank you again for a great discussion.
Welcome.
And thank you too, brothers and sisters, for joining us on Defending Life. And before we go, let me offer you 2 items. The priests at Priest for Life are happy to remember you and your loved ones at Mass, and will provide you with Mass cards for the living and the deceased, so you can use them when the occasion arises, whether it is a baptism or wedding or anniversary or birthday, a funeral, or just at a special time of need. Let us send you a supply of Mass cards today. And of course, second, if you're concerned about making those medical decisions for yourself or your loved ones, Priest for Life provides a document that is legally and morally safe to use to appoint a healthcare proxy of your own choosing, who can speak for you when you cannot speak for yourself, and who will carry out the decision consistent with your faith. Contact us again at Priest for Life for this document called The Will to Live. And remember, you can invite Father Pavone, Father Wilde, myself, and other members of our Priest for Life team like Alveda King, Brian Kemper, to your churches, communities, and pro-life events. Check out our website for priestforlife.org for details. And on behalf of Father Pavone, our National Director, and all our Priest for Life family, I urge you, let us hear from you. Send us your success stories or your questions and comments. Please connect with us on Twitter and Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and more. Go to priestforlife.org to find the links to these platforms. And remember, there are some abortions only you can stop, and some lives only you can save. Join us again next week on Defending Life.